It's funny. People always be like, don't forget about the little people. It's like, why do they refer themselves as little anyway, you know? Why don't you just get big with me? You know? They can see it in my eyes.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of John's Untitled Podcast. This week's guest is Fallon Bowman, formerly of Kittie, also of Amphibious Assault and her solo stuff, which are one and the same, but slightly different for a few different reasons, as you'll hear later in this episode. I want to take a moment to thank her again for taking the time to do this episode. She was very warm and bubbly in our conversation, as you'll hear, and go to the Chicago Tattoo Convention. Sadly, my tattoo did not place in the Tattoo of the Day competition that I entered it in, but I walked away with a really great tattoo regardless. But overall, it was a lot of fun with some friends, and I was able to talk to John James Ryan Jr. while him and the 4 Year Strong guys were rolling through Chicago on tour, and we sat down and did a podcast. And while most of it was about wrestling, I'd say a good half of it was about wrestling. It was just, fun to bullshit and meet a guy that I've heard a lot of great things about, and he is as nice and polite and big-hearted as I have heard he has been, or heard that he is, from everyone that I know that knows him. So it was really great getting to catch up with him, and hopefully we will maybe have him on down the road as well to delve more into some of the issues that we scratched the surface of on that podcast, which you'll hear probably in about a month. And lastly, you may have noticed on the Douglas Robinson episode that I posted a week ago that I had extra new intro music. I don't think I've ever talked about the intro music at all. I put it in the show notes and stuff like that in case anyone wants to look and see who it is, but officially on the podcast I'm going to say that the intro music is by a Buffalo rapper by the name of Shay Hawk. I've known of Shay for a long time, I would say over a decade at this point, and we have been in constant contact over the various social medias that have existed in a decade or so, from MySpace all the way now to Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. Dude's been super supportive of everything that I have been doing, whether it be booking shows or starting this podcast. Shay had given me the go-ahead to use some of his music for, however I saw fit to use. I couldn't think of any better music to pick than Shay's as far as being a representation of an artist who grows, someone who constantly is evolving to better put out a product that represents them. And I kind of feel like that mirrors what I'm trying to do with this podcast. So the new song that I started using and will continue to keep using as the kickoff intro music is a song called Ambition, and it's off of his Blues of a Journeyman record. And the other song that I've been using that has always been on here is a song called Chin Ups, and that is off the record Dance Party for the Heavy Hearted. Again, I believe you can find that on iTunes or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you find music. Simply put, go check out Shay Hawk. He is super awesome. I think you will dig his music. It's very expansive as far as the styles of music and the lyrical content, and as you see, if you look at any of his videos, he is also a visual artist as well. So definitely looking forward to getting him on the podcast sometime maybe this year. Without further ado, here's my chat with Fallon Bowman. Enjoy. So, welcome to another episode of my podcast. I have the pleasure today of speaking to Fallon Bowman. As I had learned today, I have been mispronouncing that name the entirety of following her career in various forms. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm out of work and I have a cocktail in front of me, so I'm doing a lot better.
Woohoo!
I always feel like people are secretly judging me when they can see me drinking, and I'm like, I already put in my 8+ hours of work or whatever, so...
So this is my downtime where I get to talk to cool people, so...
Yeah, actually...
That's what I would...
Yes, yeah. That's very much what it does.
I do not have a cocktail, unfortunately. I did have water, but I could go get wine, but, that's... Yeah.
What is your preferred...
Make this a really, really interesting interview.
What is your preferred wine? Are you a red or a white or a dry, sweet?
I'm a red. But generally, if it's there, I'll drink it. Not gonna lie.
I feel like
Yeah.
that's actually most wine drinkers. Like you go wine tasting and people are like, you start off with your samples and you're trying to be polite and taking the small sips and doing all the fancy, swirling around, looking at the legs, and then it just turns into by
Yeah.
the third sample, you're like, "Fuck it, give it to me. It's a shot."
But then again, I have tasted bad wine. So once you've tasted bad wine and then you've tasted good wine, um, then your palate can distinguish these differences. But at the same time, sometimes you reach a point where you're like, okay, I'm 3 glasses in,
Who cares?
so it doesn't even matter what it tastes like at this point.
See, living here in Michigan, specifically Grand Rapids. We have been deemed Beer City, USA, the last 3 years in a row, and the irony
Ooh,
has been a lot of I enjoy a lot of good beers and really expensive beers. Same with liquors and stuff like that.
sure.
But on the flip side, if I'm broke, I don't care if I have $1 can of PBR or whatever. It's like if you go into it thinking it's going to be the best tasting beer in the world, then you're going to be. I guess it's all in what you're expecting out of it. So I
Totally.
I feel like it's funny. Like I said, watching wine drinkers try to be all snooty about their wine and I only buy these kinds of things, and it's like you know I can enjoy a good port wine or whatever, but on the flip side, sometimes a box of Franzia is just as good as well.
The boxed wine.
Slap the
Oh
bag.
man. Yeah, yeah. I can say that I've had box wine once in my entire life, and it was
Really?
gato negro,
Gato
gato negro.
Negro. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was boxed wine, and it was I when I was living in Denmark, I was in school there, and somebody bought boxed wine. I'm like, I don't think I've ever actually drank boxed wine, so I'm kind of scared. Yeah, totally not worth the hangover. Not yeah, it was really not like. I mean, sometimes you're like, you know what? I'm going to invest in this hangover. I might as well just, give her. But no, not worth it. Definitely not.
Actually, speaking of you being out in Denmark and overseas in general, have you found that like a good wine that you are sad that you can't always find it as readily available as maybe say a Franzia?
They do have Gato Negro there.
Okay.
That's for sure, and I know that we have that here too. But there is one particular wine that I found. I'm a pretty big Spanish wine fan, so pretty much anything made in Spain, I generally will drink it, which is hilarious because people are like, "Oh, Italian wine is the best, French wine is the best," but I'm all about Spain. So there's this one particular brand of wine that I found there that I can't find anywhere else, and it makes me so sad because it's such an excellent wine. But um, yeah, and it's relatively cheap actually. Maybe I guess it would be like maybe $8 or $9 US, like cheap but so good.
So, in preparing for this interview, as we were talking before we hit record, it's kind of hard to find information about you. You're not one that's done a lot of interviews, and some of the few things you've done are very sparse. I don't know if that's a deliberate plan to keep people interested in your doings, so you're not oversaturating people with like the story of you or what you've been up to, like it seems to be with the social age that we live in. But um, as I was saying, I find it kind of interesting that uh, you've been able to keep so much of your life kind of to yourself. And what little tidbits I could find, I always found interesting, like the fact you were speaking of being in Denmark, and I spoke of you being in Italy. I ended up finding out that is it a master's in archaeology?
Yeah, it's my master's is actually in classics with
Classics,
the
that's right.
focus on classical archaeology. Yeah.
So how did you choose that career path?
This is going to be a really convoluted story, but it's actually kind of cool. So, there was this movie. It was a made-for-TV movie that came out about this kid, and I think his name was Darren Huneman. Darren Huneman. Anyways, this kid. This happened out in BC, in Canada. This kid became obsessed with this Albert Camus play called Caligula,
Okay.
and he legitimately thought that he was the reincarnation of Caligula. Caligula was an emperor in the first century, AD, AD or CE, depending on if you're a Christian or not.
Okay.
Anyway, so he literally thought he was the reincarnation of this Roman emperor, and he felt like he could control people's minds and stuff. So he was actually kind of cuckoo bananas, and they did this movie about him. And based on me watching this movie, I'm like, I know nothing about these Roman people. So I read up on it, and this was right after it was like maybe a year and a half after I left the band. So I was like super depressed about my life, and I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. Should I do school? What should I do? And blah blah blah. Anyway, so I read up on it, and I got super interested in it, probably for the same reasons that he got interested in it, funnily enough. Um, and the thing that's even crazier about him is that I believe he was also a serial killer or something. He became a serial killer. That's really fucked up about it, is that he was a serial killer who was obsessed with this play. And anyway, so I got interested in it through this crazy serial killer guy, basically. That's how I got. I'm like, okay, well, he introduced me to this play about that, about the Romans, and I read up on it, and I was like, oh my god. So that was me fangirling over the Romans. So yeah,
So were you big into like mythology then, like Greek mythology and all that kind of stuff as well, or no?
I think it was more the little bit of that, but also the extravagance of it, of the time, of especially of the peak periods of their
Culture.
sort of culture and whatnot. So that, I think, was interesting to me. The mythology as well, of course, but ultimately it was the archaeology that really got me.
So it wasn't Indiana Jones.
I mean, I liked Indiana Jones, but
That's low hanging fruit.
yeah, oh yeah. I was like, I like Indiana Jones, but that wasn't that. That wasn't. It was this crazy kid that it was the catalyst for me. I don't know. It's
Um,
weird like that.
Trying to think of the timeline roughly of when you would have left Kittie. Were you still, obviously I would say assume you were still around like college age, so you weren't like starting later than like your peers or anything like that?
um. Hmm. When I started, I think I was actually a little bit older than other people, like maybe by a year or so.
Something I've kind
Years.
of, as I say, something I've kind of wondered too was, do you feel like maybe you touring as much as you did in Kittie allows you to kind of maybe most college age kids, if they go like right out of high school, you hear so many people like changing their majors, not being sure of who they want to be or what they want to do. Do you feel like maybe that gave
Mhm.
you a leg up, kind of getting a little bit of a later head start and kind of having hit the road as much as you did and kind of explored the world?
I think it definitely helped, and that's I think why uh, I did so well too, because I was able to not get bogged down with adulting, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Like, oh my god, like I have to do this, I have to do that, or whatever. And I'm like, I've already been doing that for like 5 years, so it's fine. Living on your own or doing all that kind of thing, I basically was already doing that. So I do think it did help significantly, in fact.
Do you feel like you obviously your experiences were very wildly different than most people's would have been. Did you find it a little bit hard maybe to relate to some of the people, like some of your peers that you would have met through some of your classes, or does that not?
Definitely,
Yeah.
yeah. Unfortunately, that was the trade off. I didn't have a quote unquote normal um, adolescence in a lot of ways. I didn't get to experience, prom or any of those sort of or teenage love or any of that stuff. I never had to. I didn't start dating until I was like 20. So like I just didn't have any of those experiences. So it was really like, oh man, I can't even relate to like, these American movies about high school kids. Like I'm like, I can't relate to this.
Did anyone know who you were? I mean, because you went to school, you said in BC, or was that where the
No, in Ontario.
Ontario? Okay.
The BC thing was this. I'll send the link to you
Okay.
so that you can see it. But anyways, no, I went to school in Ontario, and I actually went back to high school right away.
Oh wow.
Like physically to high school. Um, just because I felt that that was important for me to
Graduate.
mentally, I think,
Oh yeah.
and for me to sort of, yeah, to graduate as well was really important to me as well. So, yeah.
It's got to be weird. Like I'm kind of sorry to harp on uh, the pre time, but as someone who went
No.
to high school and did all that kind of stuff, it's like you always hear of like I'm thinking of like this really dates me, Jonathan Taylor Thomas and people like that who
Yes.
were like doing Lion King and doing Home Improvement and stuff like that, and had teachers on the set and had like traveling tutors or whatever for them so they can
Yeah.
continue doing their work. Was that ever something you ladies had to do at all, or
No, we
no?
tried. I tried anyways to do. I don't remember what it was. I think it was just like an English class or something when we first started touring. We didn't even have like we had just gotten signed, and I tried to do it, and it was legitimately the last thing I wanted to do.
How did your parents actually feel about that? Because I mean, on the one hand, I can totally see them being like, "Wow, you were passionate about this band thing to the point now where you're able to progress and kind of have a career." But with
Mm-hmm.
it being at such a young age, it's like, was there like a weird like hesitation of like, well, I really would like you to go to school, but this is kind of like a once in a lifetime thing, so maybe, yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely the second. Definitely, especially
Well,
they. My parents were in a lot of ways very not conservative, but just they just wanted the best for me, but they saw that there was so much passion and so much dedication in me to want to do this that my father is in the performing arts as well, so we kind of understood where this came from. I'm like, it came from you. Damn it, I inherited it from you. So okay, so he understood to some degree, and he knew that I was in good hands, and that I had a good head on my shoulders. I think if I had a different kind of personality, then he probably wouldn't have let me do it. But he knew that I could probably handle it. So
what I mean, with the internet being what it is now, you can kind of find a scene, whether it be in your hometown or home state or whatever, or even in the tri-state area.
yeah,
But back then, with the internet not really being even around, what was there really a scene out in Canada? Like, I'm trying to think of bands, and most of the bands I'm coming up with are very radio friendly, like your
yeah,
Our Lady pieces and stuff like that. So it's like you're not
yeah.
really. I'm not really thinking of too many metal bands coming out of that area. But was there really a thriving scene back and when you first started the band and all that, playing out in general?
There were other local bands, and we had a relatively healthy metal scene for being such a small city at the time. So surprisingly, yes. And then we sort of branched out to meet other metal bands in Toronto. So yeah, there was actually quite, but none of them really became like big, quote unquote. But um, that not that I can think of. Oh no, now I'm gonna probably eat my words. They're gonna be like, "You forgot about us." I'm like, "I'm sorry."
It's just really weird.
Um,
As I say, it's
yeah.
just been kind of really weird. Like I said, trying to prepping for this, doing a lot of backtracking, and just kind of trying to find any interviews you had done specifically or been a part of. And I feel like there's just it seemed from my perspective and living within a lot closer, I would say, than most people listening from Michigan to Canada's, not as astronomically as far as like saying like California, depending on where you're going. But it just kind of seemed like you guys just kind of. I keep saying guys, and my grandmother would hate me for that because she
You
always,
guys.
yeah, she always, whenever we go to a restaurant, like my parents and I would cover our faces because we knew that my grandmother was going to go, I don't know about the guys, but us ladies would like. Um,
Oh, okay.
so
Actually, I've had a couple of people who are like their second language is English, and they always ask me like, "Why is it that you when you go into a store, for example, here, anyways?" I'm like, "Yeah, do you guys have any XYZ?" They're like,
yeah,
"Yeah, but you're not talking to guys." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's just a flavor of the English language. Like we just kind of use it's almost kind of sexist language. It's just
yeah.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. Like, and it's not meaning to be offensive. It's just
No, no, no.
do. Yeah.
Whenever I'm very aware of it, and I try not to do it, just because I know my grandmother would be really upset with me. But when looking up interviews with you ladies, I, I don't really ever think I've found anything that kind of discussed the very beginning per se about you got you all playing around and it just kind of seemed like boom it just happened and here you all are playing and
Mm-hmm.
here's a CD in stores whatever for us to buy. So I haven't really seen too much about the beginning part of you all playing out and kind of growing your band.
Yeah, and it was really it actually the time from the time that we started in '96, sort of loosely playing shows, battle of the bands and stuff like that, up until when we got signed in 1999, is actually that's actually pretty quick considering other bands maybe do 10 or 15 years. We just I think it was a combination of sort of timing and whatnot. But at any rate, yeah, we were playing Battle of Bands. We were playing, contacting clubs, especially in Toronto, and we would like get my friend's dad to drive us or something like that. We bring all of our equipment. Yeah, yeah, like legitimately,
Actually, how did that
you
work?
know.
Because I know around here, like you can't play at places if you're underage. So how did that work for all of you?
You know what? I have no idea. I have no idea how that was even legal because they knew that we were young, like that we were 15. I was 14. I was the youngest. No, I was not the youngest. Mercedes was the youngest, but she's like 2 months younger than me, so we're pretty much the same age. And like we were kids, like little kids. When I think about my niece, who is well, she's 16 now. Like
Going to a
that's
bar?
that's like what?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's just because the parents were there, to supervise. Which supervise? What did they supervise? Nothing. So you know, we go into another room and sneak a beer or something. I don't know.
Well, that and I guess the laws in Canada with drinking ages are a lot more lax. Like I think the legal drinking age is what 19, 18.
19, yeah,
Okay.
19, 18 in Quebec.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Everyone. That's another like Michigan thing I never did. Like everyone would go up to
Go to
Canada.
Canada.
I never did. I still have never been to Canada actually. I
What?
know it's so close, and I don't know. Just have never gone.
Never, never
Not yet.
gone. Well,
Not yet.
you never know. We're gonna be here for a while, I hope. So, yeah.
um. So you end up going to college, and was the pursuit always to see it through to a master's, or was that just kind of
No.
no, just a kind of a slow? Well, I got this far. I guess I'll go for your what is it, a
Yep.
doctorate and then a master's.
Master's, and then I've applied to do my doctorate actually
Doctorate.
now, so that I can become a doctor. That's all I want. I just want to be like Dr. Fallon Bowman. That's very important to me. So,
Have to get brand new business cards.
indeed, indeed, got to go all the way.
So you end up going to school for classics.
Mhm.
Um, Now, do you have to go through like an internship where you go on various digs, or is it more of like coursework where you're going to maybe even your own college where you were at to like be an understudy or a teacher's assistant, or what does your beginning process of the job look like?
See, it really depends because classics is one of those things, um, that is it's a very very old discipline that a lot of very uh, dare I say, uppity, very rich, uppity white men would do for it as a pastime, basically, to just translate Latin and Greek texts and stuff like that. So, um, in Canada, anyways, and in the U.S., that's what's mainly what it's based on, and the archaeology part of it, especially in North America, is only within the last maybe 30 or 40 years become a thing, or maybe even 30 years, I would say. Um, so that was unfortunately because I'm not really a classical classicist in that way. I don't like translating. I don't like sitting and doing those sorts of things. It's not my bag. I like to go out and actually physically dig and be more practical about it. And so basically they're in the process of sort of changing the program to be more dynamic and more modern day, as opposed to, the same program that they've had since, 18 whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, as a student, as a master's student, I was a teaching assistant, and I taught classes as well as help profs and stuff like that. So that's sort of was my everyday.
Did you ever latch on to the teaching side? Like, is that something you may ever want to do?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always interesting. I always feel like people who are interested in teaching, I feel like just have a lot of patience and are able to articulate
Well, me
themselves very well.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, and you hear legitimately everything. Every kind of excuse, you have all kinds of people coming into your office hours and asking you questions that you never thought that you'd hear from say, third year university students. I'm like, you don't know these things yet? And it says a lot of has it highlights a lot of glaring issues with the educational system in Canada, I guess. When they can't write an essay effectively. Um, and then in their defense, I didn't learn how to write an essay effectively until my first year of university, because like, ask me about grammar or anything like that. I knew zero about it and how things were constructed and all this blah blah blah. So I took a course dedicated to it because I knew that it was going to help me, and basically that's what I was having to deal with, was just being very patient with people that did not have that background. Um, yeah.
I've loved it. As I was talking on a different podcast with TJ Miller from Still Remains, something I wanted to kind of talk to him about, having been in a touring band for like 10 years, and then the band kind of stopped hitting the road completely, more or less. But as we were discussing the transition from being in a full time touring band to then getting readjusted to, I'll just say, quote unquote, normal life, how your skills you learn on the road being in a band, how they actually are really applicable to, you know, getting a job, a real job. Um, did you, I guess I'll pose the same question. Like, did you find that when you were kind of going back to school or having to do, things more day to day, that you were able to apply a lot of what you had learned on the road to your day to day life in very, like,
I think
different
so.
ways?
Yeah, especially with regards to, sort of, say, time management or something like that. If we had a very full day of meeting with different people, um, and so you sort of had to put on a bit of
Up front?
a show, or yeah, a bit of your sales pitch with a lot of people, because you had to be, very composed and ready and uh, articulate and whatnot. That's a lot of pressure to put on a 16-year-old to sound like you know what the fuck you're talking about. So um, I feel like that helped me, especially when I started getting into doing theater and acting and whatnot, because I just kind of knew that I had to put on a show. Um, to some degree, and also even in getting like jobs, like I just knew that, okay, I'm like, I've got to turn on the charm, right? I got to get,
Right.
like, it was, getting radio stations to play us, for example. I remember very distinctly, there was our publicist came in and was like, yo, so this radio station, this radio host is being a little bit of a dick, doesn't really want to play you guys, so turn on the charm. So that's exactly what we did, and it was basically selling our product, quote unquote, to this person who was not feeling it. So it was basically taking that idea and applying it uh, to getting a regular job at a wherever, or selling something to someone in a clothing store or whatever. It's the same principle. It's just, selling different products.
Right. I guess that's going to be as good as any segue for me to bring up something I've kind of been discussing with my wife and playing around with. I
Mm-hmm.
talked to you earlier about something that I think it's because, like, I'm in this weird part, like, where, as I've kind of been discussing on a few other podcasts that I've done, when you hit like your late 20s, early 30s, you just kind of start re-looking at at not only the youth, the culture coming up below you, and kind of looking back to how you grew up, and kind of in conjunction to maybe like the people that came, a little bit before you, and just kind of putting it all into a perspective of just your life. Um, but something I've kind of been going back through and thinking about is, like I said, in the instance of you and T.J. Miller and like Nick from It Dies Today, all of you were signed in a band at a pretty young age. I would say you more so the youngest out of all of them, um,
Hmm.
by a few years at least. But I've been kind of latching onto this concept of like people growing up and maturing at different ages, and what being an assigned band kind of, basically your band is a business,
Hmm.
at that point, and a product that people are expecting, you to make and distribute and so forth, and all the
Hmm.
things that go into being an assigned band, and how it affects your growth as a adolescent trying to figure out who they are, and all the extra pressures maybe it puts on you, or and maybe I'm putting that on to these people and yourself included.
Yeah.
um, but I just think back to, uh, not knowing what the fuck I wanted to do or who the fuck I was at 15, 16, let alone worrying about having to sell myself to somebody else so that maybe I get an extra 5 spins a day in, wherever the fuck you are.
Yeah.
That the added pressures that puts on you as a person, and what it does to you as you grow up, you know, progress as a person and as an individual. Um, I don't know if that's something you would like to elaborate on at all, but it's something I've been finding very interesting the more I think about it.
I think it certainly had a very marked influence on me, having to come to that realization that okay, this isn't just us playing us playing in the basement anymore. It's a business. It's something with its own life that we need to keep feeding in order to, move on, keep going. Um, and that was something I had to realize very quickly. And I think to some degree, at some point, it stopped being fun, and it, you know, kind of was at odds with me being an adolescent and going through all these really weird feelings of elation, even more so than you normally would, and having to sort of play that out in public was difficult. And so it's kind of a weird comparison because I'm like nobody in comparison to some of these people, but like when I see these celebrities, young celebrities that have these complete meltdowns, and people
Yep.
are like, ah ha, ha, this person is losing her friggin' marbles. I'm like, man, don't don't give her shit or him or her shit, because it's so easy to get there, when you're going through this really weird uh
Time in your life.
stage time in your life that you're playing out in front of everybody, and you can't make mistakes because people are sort of putting you on this, either on, like, I mean, in some cases putting you on a pedestal or under a microscope, or you're being scrutinized all the time. So it definitely had a profound effect on me, because after I left the band, I didn't know who the hell I was. I'm like, okay, now I didn't know who I was then, still trying to figure out who I am now, and I think I'm still trying to figure out who I am now as a 30-year old. Um, so yeah, I think it definitely is was a difficult road to travel. I will say that.
Something, and kind of speaking to this, something, once you had left the band, you had posted, and I'm kind of hopping ahead quite a bit. You posted on your Tumblr, a couple months ago, when that whole Facebook trend of, list the albums of your youth that influenced you and have stuck with you.
Yep.
You took it from 10 to 60 and gave an explanation of why on each of them. Um,
Yep.
as someone who's very loosely followed your career over the past decade plus, between Amphibious Assault and then the time in Pigface, and onto your solo career,
Yep.
your list is a very good representation, I think, of the many facets of you musically, that have shaped you. And upon leaving Kittie, I think Amphibious Assault probably caught a lot of people off guard,
Yep.
due to due to it just being, it's not a metal band, it's not, as aggressive. outwardly, I would say. I think if you
Yeah.
really take it in and kind of compare it to a lot of the contemporary stuff that you were influenced by, I think that the aggression is in a completely different form as opposed to just being down-tuned guitars and loud, aggressive music, outwardly.
Exactly.
Um,
Yep.
but how hard was it for you to find who you were musically around that same time? Like, were you
Uh,
trepid in deciding that Amphibious Assault was the launching point for you as, I guess, a solo career at that point?
at first, yes, because I got so much hate from metal, like diehard metalheads, that they're like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, your band sucks." And it was like a sort of, residual Kittie fans that were mad that I left the band in the first place. And it was, yeah, it was difficult, but I knew that it was where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. So I was I was a little bit hesitant at first, and I'm like, you know what, fuck you guys. Like, if you're not gonna embrace the fact that I have evolved into something else, or I've evolved musically or whatnot, like, then that's fine. You don't have to listen to me. That's cool. But I was still dead set that that was where I wanted to go with it. Excuse me. And I'm still, that's it's still what gets me going, basically. So
Do you find even all
um
the sorry, go ahead.
no, no, I'm still trying to clear the cloth. Thank you.
Yep. No, I was gonna say, do you find and I guess now it's kind of fun doing these on occasion because like other projects have popped up since a lot of these things. So initially, maybe when I wanted to have reached out, like the whole Kittie documentary thing wasn't even a forethought,
Yep.
at least as far as to the public anyway. Um,
Yeah.
so before that, do you still find like that people are still probably very much like myself, where it's like we know you basically from Kittie, don't really know that you did anything else, although like on my end that's not necessarily the case, but generally speaking, most of the fans you have kind of followed you from the beginning, and that you've maintained these fans, for over a decade at this point.
Yeah. Definitely not making any new fans that have never heard of me, for sure. Most of the people have been the ones that have followed me from Kittie all the way to now.
See, what's kind of weird is I would have figured you would have gained a completely different fan base from your time in Pigface, because that's such a super group of people, or maybe to the point where there's so many people involved that people don't know who's actually involved because it's like what,
Yep.
200 or 100 plus
200.
people, yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
maybe I guess that's actually, I just answered my own question, that maybe you fall into this weird anonymity of just being a member
Yeah.
within this larger thing.
Yep. Yep. Definitely.
Um, with what little bit I've actually been able to find, because as I found very quickly, most of your stuff is not on iTunes. But then
Nope.
upon doing some digging, I found that it was because you wanted people to find your music and have to come to you to get it.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so with that being the case, I kind of was able to find some of your solo stuff on YouTube and whatnot, and find it that way. What was that process like, kind of rebranding yourself and showing another completely different side to you musically?
Oh, oh.
I mean,
Well,
and again, I don't know if I'm speaking very generally or if it was kind of this process, but it seems like I'm always with, like, from Kittie to Amphibious Assault, there was the, oh, you're a metal chick, to now you are a industrial person, to then
no.
with to the solo stuff, to being, I mean, there's a couple of like straight up kind of more alternative indie rock kind of vibes to it at times.
Yep. Yep.
So at that point, like I said, again, like if you go to through your list of what influenced you, it doesn't come as a surprise when you go in back and listen to everything, because it's a good cross section of everything is there. But I think
Yeah.
if you just go through and if you haven't read that list, everything might catch you off guard because you're expecting it to be one thing. So what was the process like of rebranding yourself at that point?
At that point, yeah. And it's funny because that record actually started out as an Amphibious Assault record, and then I changed my mind about it afterwards, because I'm like, I need more guitars in this, I need more of this, and it just kind of became this its own monster. in and of itself. So
Why did?
um,
Sorry.
it was very stressful, I think, because I had this vision, but I didn't know how to realize it because first of all, I didn't have a band. So I'm like, okay, how do I go about doing this? And it just kind of took on its own life. Um, so it was stressful. That's what I'll say.
Why have you? Why was Amphibious Assault not your solo project per se?
I think it was because I originally envisioned Amphibious Assault to be a very political band
Okay.
group. Sorry, I guess solo project. With a very large component of it being with a political message.
Did you?
Because
I was gonna say, did
it
you
came
not
because
want to tie your name to that and kind of get a little distance from it, or was it not even that much thought out?
it wasn't that much thought out, to be honest.
Okay.
I think it was just because of the political climate at the time, being in 2002.
Right.
It was, um, it's much like what's going on now. It's just a really heavy political time. A lot of shit was going on, and so I kind of got caught up in that fervor, and it just came out in musically. Um, but then there were other things going on, so it wasn't necessarily going to be political anymore because it was like also a lot of love songs and stuff like that, but in industrial. So yeah, I think it's very indicative of my personality. There's so much duality going on. There's so much stuff that's like this black and white that are feuding with each other. That's basically my life is two forces feuding with each other. So
Kind of a weird. Speaking of duality, a weird. I don't even know the word I'm looking for. How much of with you being so much into I mean, with your degree being in kind of the past and our history as a whole, even if it's very specific to a certain subculture or a time frame, how much of that maybe affects what you write at all or inspires you lyrically like at all?
I did. I still have it actually. It's on a hard drive somewhere. Um, I have a song that I wrote in Latin that I was gonna do. Uh, it's sitting somewhere and I don't know what to do with it. So it as a direct influence, yes, that is definitely there. Um, but other than that, not much. Although I haven't really explored it to be honest, and I probably should.
I was gonna say I feel like sometimes in going through your Tumblr, which is more or less a blog at times to things,
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like with some of the stuff that you no pun intended digging up, that potentially that you could maybe write a pretty interesting like concept record around something that your day job is allowing you to find and kind of unearth. Another, again, no pun intended. Um, these things just come sometimes.
I know, right?
But it seems like you would have a wealth of material to draw from, and sometimes it's you constantly talk about like, oh, the my musical muse isn't there, and I feel like the potentially is at least lyrically maybe being able to step outside of yourself or even your own things you're doing to be able to write about something else and just approach it from a more of a creative writing aspect.
Yeah. Well, and I also think to some degree I miss writing with other people. I find that sometimes writing by myself is quite isolating, and I need uh, the enthusiasm of another person. I think to bounce off of, and I think that is what's been hindering me for the past 4 or 5 years since Human Conditional came out. I'm like, I need to write with someone or to do something with somebody because by myself, I'm completely like a horrible case of writer's block. It's horrible, and I have all this music. I'm like, oh, I have everything, but I'm just like, this sucks. Like, I don't even want to listen to this. This is horrible. Like, and then I'll just delete it or save it to a drive, and it just sits there for 5 years, like it has. So
Some
Yeah, I think I definitely could look at it from a different perspective, for sure.
it's just as someone who kind of read your, like I said, read through your stuff. It seems like you have a knack for putting people, like when you were this. I thought this was interesting because, and granted, you can't see me, but as someone who is a heavily tattooed person, when you were describing your trip to the, is it Sento or Senta?
Yeah, the
Okay,
Cento.
Sento. Okay,
Yeah.
um, the bathhouse basically, and your experience there. You did and reading through your trips that you had been taking, uh, do really good about describing, situations and what's going on, like very very well written. So I always
Oh,
find it kind of interesting.
you?
I found it kind of interesting that you would then, after going on for a long thing, kind of describing a quick little, event that happened, would be like, oh, I wish I could find something to write about. I'm just having a hard time. And very much just like you said, like, I wrote something and it sucked. And so I might cannibalize it for something else down the road. But
Yeah,
on the same token, I'm like, but you do have a really,
you right.
you do write and you're really good at it. Uh, and are able to evoke, the senses of, like, the warm salty water and the green water, and putting someone into a place. So I found it kind of interesting that you have a hard time writing. And the weird thing is, though, is through talking to some other people who are lyricists or the singers or whatever of whatever they
Yeah.
do, that most everybody is like, I hate writing. And I don't write very often, and when I do, I'm not a fan of it, and it's kind of a necessary evil. Um,
Yep.
so it's interesting.
I'd say resounding. I agree with that 100%. And I don't know what it is. I think it's just because we're. Me personally. I can't speak for everybody, but I'm so afraid of what people are going to think about. And it's not even really music, like lyrically. Like I don't think my lyrics are kind of they kind of come secondary to everything else because I'm such a perfectionist when it comes to these things. And even at the end of the day, I'm like, this isn't really perfect, but okay. Um, and that's my issue. And I think that is not just me. I think a lot of musicians and a lot of people that do this kind of stuff that they just need we just need that like push out the door, like just fucking do it, like you know and when I was writing my master's thesis, the exact same thing happened. My supervisor looked at me. He's like, Fallon, what is the problem? What's the problem, really? Like, really, what is the issue? You've written 180 pages worth of work. Just you're fucking done. Just do it. Okay.
What actually I thought was interesting about that story, and kind of, again, doing my research on the pieces I didn't know about what you had been doing in your life. You saying that it took someone else's music to inspire you to finish that. So it, like, again, very much piggybacking off of what you're saying, where you need to find that inspiration from somebody else. I'm forgetting the two musicians that you said you had listened to, but they were very ambient and
Oh yeah, Sign Rider and LBN 667. Yeah,
yeah. Um, Yeah, so I mean, at that point, I thought that was like that was something I kind of picked up on, where you basically were saying you couldn't figure out what you were doing, or I guess the theme or whatever it is.
yeah,
That it took something else music related for you to find your muse to finish.
yeah. That's what I needed was the push. And my supervisor was like, just do whatever you need to do. Like, you've got time and whatnot. But I think it was just because their music, and I emailed the singer or the writer, I guess, behind one of those groups, and I thanked him because I'm like, your music actually did something. I don't know what it did, but it did something, and I finished 180 pages worth of writing. So thank you. But and I wrote him like this whole, and he probably thought I was the biggest friggin' weirdo, and like writing him this whole like, your music does this to me, because sometimes I get messages like that from people too, and I'm like, really, like
I was just gonna ask
I
that.
made like I was in my basement just like tinkering around, and I thought that this sounded cool, and I drank a little bit too much in my basement, and I started dancing to it. So I'm like, okay, this must be good because someone's gonna want to dance to it if they're drunk. But so and I was like writing about how it evoked small town America and all this stuff to me, and he's like, "Thank you."
You like poured your heart and soul out to him, and he just goes, "Thank you."
Well, he was like, "Yeah, I'm glad it worked for you." Period. Nothing. I was like, "Okay." He totally creeped him out, but okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think you said you're obviously in Canada now.
Yep.
Where, without getting too personal, like I live on blah 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 street. I was kind of surprised through looking up some stuff that you have lived in Italy, you lived in Denmark, and I think you lived one other place outside of Canada. That I was shocked. I didn't know that you were as international as you, more so than you had been.
I think, and I've said this to other people, that touring and living out of a suitcase for 3 years of my life has, and I think also other experiences in my life, just being emigrating to this country and stuff like that. Like I've always felt very nomadic, and I could never stay in one place for a long time. So touring in a band, I mean that's a nomad's dream. It's just like we have no roots. We have no roots, just a suitcase, and we just travel around. And I think that has profoundly affected me, actually.
I feel like that would either be the greatest thing ever, or it would make me be more of a hermit than I'm already becoming. Because at that point, you're not really. If you know that you're probably going to pack up and leave, then I feel like the other end of that would be that you're not. You don't need people to make you happy. So at that point, you're not going to make more new friends just to leave and be like, all right, see you later, bye.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. That's a very real uh, sort of consequence of being nomadic. So, but generally, wherever I've gone, I've always made friends or people that I could, stay on their couch.
It's been kind of weird though. Like a friend of ours that is kind of in the same nomadic. I mean, she's settled down, but
Mhm.
she lives out in Portland, Oregon now,
Oh yeah.
and she posted something on Twitter. She was like, "I don't know how you're supposed to find new friends as we get older because I mean, you're so set in who you are." And it's not like it used to be where it's like, oh, do you like the color purple? Yeah, let's be
Sweet.
friends. All right, best
Oh.
friends now. I've kind of, like I said, I've been thinking a lot about my youth and how it relates to other people and just kind of people and thinking more about people in our lives as a whole. And that's something that I kind of realized as well that it's like, man, when we do hit a certain age, it is a lot harder because we are who we are, faults and all.
Yep.
And maybe someone right away will be like, nah, you're kind of damaged and broken. I don't
Yeah.
have time for
Yeah.
you.
And I feel like I kind of
But
gravitate towards people that are damaged and broken, and that has always been that's always been the case. Even still, I still do it. I'm like, okay, you're kind of weird. I kind of like weird people. Um, but I like, yeah, and it's very true that well, it's crazy like that you know I when my partner and I were living in Denmark, my
I love that you call him that, by the way.
sorry.
I a few interviews you've done that I've heard, you call him your partner, and I find that very interesting.
He is my partner though. He's my partner in life.
No, for sure. And
Yeah.
but I mean it's not a term a lot of people use. Like it's like you don't hear someone call it what it really is. I mean, you are a partner.
Yeah.
It is a partner in your life and you and in many facets without having really met very many Canadians. I don't know if that's a Canadian term that's to show, the relationship as it is. Uh or if that's just something that is a you thing
It's a me thing.
between the two of you.
But no, you know what? I haven't met many people that do say that. To be honest with you, maybe one or two other people that are from my hometown, especially. And I like the fact that people, when I say partner, unless I use the pronoun him or he, him or her, whatever, I like the fact that people can't know what the person's gender is. Like I like because I don't like people to assume those sorts of things, right? So because people can either assume, okay, well maybe she's gay, or I don't know if she's gay, and I'm like, well, you can think whatever you want to think, but you know, eh,
Was that's actually that's something I've kind of wondered too. How much of that did you get growing up?
none.
And
Me
really okay,
personally, none. No.
because I know, like I said, and as I said earlier, and I guess I'll divulge this kind of embarrassing anecdote. Growing up, like my wife and I'm 2 months older than my wife, and we have a lot of the same basis for things and a lot of the same, you know, stories kind of growing up between being into the same bands, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, we both kind of grew up in, it was the, love of new metal, as it were, or bands, around the time you all came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember as we were just talking, she was like, as I said, people always would say she looked like, pretty much as she jokes, every member of Kittie ever, because no one actually takes the time to know who they are. They just know it's an all-female metal band.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
therefore, if you have short hair and are, not a blonde girl that's, typical all-American girl, oh, you're a girl that looks like someone from Kittie. But as I was saying, at the same time that she was kind of going through that, I was going through having a photo of you in my locker from your first record, and
Yes.
getting ridiculed for liking a girl who looks weird and she has weird colored hair and blah blah blah, and remembering how that made me feel as someone coming into my own as a young adult, as a young male,
Yeah.
and feeling like what's wrong with this person. But I remember feeling ostracized for thinking that I like someone for a few things, and it's like everyone's like, well, she's weird, she's ugly, whatever,
She's
and then
not
so by
like
proxy, it's like
your
she's not like everybody
typical.
else.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those things where I know how I had to deal with it, and how my wife, basically was lumped in with, oh, you're like one of these girls. You're like one of the members of Kittie because you look like this, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like I imagine on the flip side of that, it's like, okay, like you probably got that being the person that's like, oh, well, you are that person in that band. I mean, you had mentioned in your blog thing, Courtney Love being a huge influence on you,
Yes.
being able to see that a woman could be in a quote unquote mainstream band, that you could have this angst, that you could be who you are unapologetically and still succeed and thrive and so forth. It's something I've kind of always wondered. Like, I'm I'll never be a woman, and I'll never understand what it's like growing up in the early, late '90s, early 2000s, when the internet wasn't really as big of a thing to find that there are more people like you,
Yeah.
and have the same interests as you. So I don't know. I've kind of always wondered what it was like for you, like as well, if you kind of got a lot of the shit into that, like.
Yeah, like what I like
So
both men and women. Like, are you really trying to offend me by saying that? And that's not to say that I've never gotten that before, but I rarely did. But there were people that just kind of assumed that we were, because we were females in a metal band. Because clearly you can't be straight and do this kind of work. I was like, okay. Which I always found very interesting, that, I don't like people making those kinds of assumptions, but people going to regardless. I always thought that's so interesting. Of like, what you like, and I remember that was a question that we got a lot. Like, what's your sexuality? Like, what the fuck does it matter what my sexuality is?
the weird part is, and looking, like I said, I've been kind of doing a lot of looking back in preparation for this, just trying to remember where I was, around the time of the band being, at the height of the first record, and talking with my wife, like we obviously didn't know each other, but
Mm-hmm.
some recollections of memories that we both had, so I kind of had like different perspectives on it, and it's really weird. Like, from my perspective, I remember telling her, I was like, I feel like as a man looking back, I feel like there was a really creepy sexual undertone that like the industry put on you, like they're underage and they like metal and blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
I was like, and maybe that's like putting 10-15 years behind it, to where that's my memory now.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, when my wife was talking about it, she was like, well, I mean, look at like, boy bands, they did it to them too. And I was like, but there's a huge difference. I go, okay, like let's go down that road, let's talk about boy bands. I go, I had a lot of friends and their sisters love Backstreet Boys or NSYNC or
Sure.
whoever, whatever side of the fence you fell on. And I go, you know what I remember about them? I love Justin Timberlake, because Justin Timberlake seems like he would be the kind of guy that'd sit with me and cuddle and talk about my day and like make me feel better. And I go, now flip that. I go, here's what I remember about dudes talking about members of like Kittie and shit like that, or like we'll even say Christina Aguilera. I bet she fucks real
Yeah.
good or something
Yeah.
like that, or
Yeah.
sexualizes them. And I was like, it's not the same flipped around. And even trying to go in the pop world, it's like it's not the same. Like,
Definitely
it's
not in the
not
pop.
the same at all.
But you know what? I think it's just as bad in metal as well. Maybe even
Mm,
worse.
for sure. And like I was listening to a podcast with OTEP the last couple of days, and she's super outspoken. And I was trying to remember when she kind of more or less came on the scene, but I love the fact that she's outspoken and she just kind of doesn't take any shit from anybody, male or
Yeah,
female. And I felt like that was kind of the vibe that you collectively as Kittie put out as well. Like, but how much of that is like a publicist telling you to do that and
yeah,
play it up, or to sell things because obviously we know sex sells, or
sure,
how much of that was
definitely.
like the collective, the group of you all coming out and just kind of fucking with everyone and being like, no, this is what you think we are, then fuck it, that's what we'll be.
I think it was just like shock. Because we're all
Yes,
about the
yes.
shock, right? Like it's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe she just said that on national TV. That's kind of what and it was just natural. Like we saw the sort of uncomfortable, uh, shuffling of an interviewer or whatever, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're on the right track. Okay, let's just keep going with this. So, especially if it was a male, because that was pretty easy. But
I definitely know it was something, like I said, that made me. It's something I've thought of, and it's something that made me feel really awkward to even remotely want to bring up. But in hearing some of your other interviews and hearing how you just are very open, at least you very specifically, made me feel a little bit more at ease at bringing it up because it's the intention isn't to sound like a creepy fucking weird dude who's like, ugh, that's I see it enough sometimes it shows and
it's fucking
it's
gross.
gross.
It's disgusting.
It's very
Yeah,
gross.
and you know what? I think a lot of it is it's accepted and encouraged in especially in metal, which I think was really difficult to see as a young female. Um, you know, I always had inherently had a problem with bands that had like strippers as part of their on stage show. I'm like, what exactly, and all the power to the girl doing it if she wanted to do it or whatever. Like, I'm 100% a feminist. I'm like, you do you, woohoo! But um, at the same time, I don't like this perpetuation of you know the sex object thing that has started in I don't know maybe the 80s or whatever with Motley Crue, who knows? But it was like this hardcore sexualization of women. And then even when they had a band like remember Vixen, the band Vixen,
Yes. Yes.
um,
Yep.
there was this kind of kitschy aspect to them as well. Like they were this band or whatever that was like kind of hard rock or whatever, but there were also these sexy women, and I always thought that was so weird. I'm like, what? Why? Like,
The only other band I've really ever thought of that kind of fit the same vibe that I felt like was kind of put on Kittie as a whole would have been the Runaways.
yeah, totally.
And I don't know if that was ever an influence between for any of you ladies in the band, but I looking back kind of feel like there are a lot of parallels between what you all went through collectively
Yeah,
between the Runaways and Kittie, but even more to the fact of you bringing up Vixen, even Lita Ford, like look at
yeah,
how she was presented,
yep,
and it's like she could rip on a guitar and like wrote really good songs, but unfortunately, like when the videos were the driving force, it's like all right, well here you are in like a weird leather like leotard thing or a
yeah.
singlet or
And I'm
whatever,
like,
and it's
what?
like, but you're not even playing your guitar. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's
And
actually
I
what
always
you
thought that was
should be known for.
yeah, and I thought that was always very strange. But like the way that we dress it for, and you can even when you look at pictures of us, starting at the very beginning, we had a sort of we were really heavily influenced by glam rock, so we were wearing all these kind of glam rocky clothes. But then people started looking at us in the wrong way, thinking, "Oh, okay, you're that kind of band." And we're like, "No, no, 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 no. We're." And we felt that we had to change the way that we looked in order for people to take us seriously. And that is that's an unfortunate reality of what it is like to be at that time anyways to be a female in that in that genre was that you couldn't wear a skirt without someone being like you're that kind of girl then, eh?
Let's actually talk about that because we were discussing that earlier about how on your cover was it Hole or Veruca Salt? One of the
Cool.
two you had okay Hole that you
Yeah.
covered and got some shit apparently from a dude who now you're friends with still, uh, calling you out
Friends,
saying that
yeah.
I can hear the air quotes.
Yeah,
In as much as anyone's friends nowadays with people from high school,
right. Yeah.
or whatever it
Public
was, grade eight, I
speaking.
think. Yeah, that apparently you got shit for putting your foot on the monitor
Yeah.
while you were wearing a skirt or a dress or whatever it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
I feel like that's super absurd.
Yeah, and I remember he said it so candidly, like, you know,
Like
sort of
nonchalantly, like just very like, oh.
nonchalant, sort of off the cuff, and I was so hurt. I'm like, who the fuck do you think you are by saying that? Like, really? Who the hell are you? You're some random fucking loser dude in, I was so angry. I couldn't believe it. And I remember telling the girls after, I'm like, blank said this to me? This fucker? That dickless piece of shit. Like, yeah. And that's not the first time, actually. There was another guy who I am not friends with on Facebook because he tried to, and I blocked him because
Oh.
I'm still fucking mad about this. And there are no jokes about girls holding grudges, but this is a thing. When we first got signed, I remember talking to him on the phone, and he's like, "Oh, great, great." And he had a band too, and he was kind of, struggling a little bit because he really wanted to get signed and blah blah blah. So I'm telling him we got signed, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's so wonderful, it's so great, whatever." He's like, "Yeah, but you know the reason why you guys got signed, though, right?" And I'm like, "Uh, please, pray tell, why is it that we've gotten signed, buddy?" And he's like, "Oh well, because you're girls. Like, I mean, that's generally what it comes down to." And I like had to pull the phone away from my head. I'm like, this motherfucker, like, really? And you know what? And you unfortunately have to take it. You have to take it, and
That
then
sucks.
deflect. You learn that. I think you're conditioned as a girl to sort of sometimes take it and be like, that didn't just happen. But then, you reach like your boiling point after a while, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck you! Like, who the hell do you think you are? And I did see him after I left the band too, and he's like, "How's it going?" I'm like, I still hate you. I still hate you. I can't get it out
Justifiable.
of my blood. Yeah, so
My wife actually, in the job career in the pharmaceutical industry that she works in. Um, but as I've heard from other women, because I go out and drink with her female coworkers, so I hear a lot of the shittiness of like their industry and how people are putting them down. And I'm around a lot of this, and I hear a lot of this, so it just makes me hate. It makes
I
me hate
hate
a lot of men.
everyone. No,
More
it's
so
true.
men, because I see it.
Yeah,
But
because a lot of it, I think, is just a showing of really horrible insecurity, and then it's this, and you can see it like when people like that. I work with people like that, especially doing archaeology here in southern Ontario. A lot of these guys are, you're like really regular dudes, and then they'll just say things. You're like, what fucking planet do you think that that's okay to talk about? Like, just don't. And then they
out of
get
curiosity, is it a very male centric job
yes,
field as well?
yes,
Is it okay?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Still, it's the stereotypical old white man uh in sort of tilly hat, and that's a whole other story. Um, but it just it just comes off, and you're like, what? Why? And then they get mad at you because you react. Like, what do you want me to not say anything? Because I'm going to say something. What you said is inappropriate. But the difference with me now as opposed to then, I generally wouldn't say anything, but now I just don't give a shit because I'm having to deal with it since I was like 14. So
I guess kind of in closing on this, because I'm sure people love hearing me discuss like men suck. But on the flip side of that, though, like between a few women that I know, and I'm kind of loving the camaraderie that's going on, and kind of the inclusive, if I can borrow from Jamie Josta, the
yeah.
inclusive, not exclusive, like vibe going on between women. So much even so to the marches that we just had about a month ago, I think at this
Yep.
point.
Yep.
So I mean, as someone who's, I mean, you've kind of talked about things going on here in the states. How much of these things that have been going on have kind of impacted you abroad?
I don't think you can escape it. No matter how much, if you want to, you can't, because I don't think that the time to sit around and do nothing or not consume what you're seeing is now. It's now and ever. I think these issues need to be talked about and not swept under the carpet anymore. And I, for one, was really just to do it or any of that stuff because I there was a time there was one in Copenhagen, but I wasn't I didn't really know anybody that was involved with it or whatever. So I was like, how do I get involved with this? But there wasn't one. No, you know what? I was in Italy at the time when they were having one in Copenhagen, and there was not one in Italy where I was, which I found interesting. I'm like, no women's march here. Okay, but at any rate, I think that you can't escape it. Of course, it's going to be the times and the turbulence that's going on there um is infectious. It's sort of like all the atoms are moving and things are crashing together. It's like stuff is happening. It's kind of exciting but also very scary, and that that we're living through this right now. So of course it's definitely affected me. Also just um we're talking about uh, material for writing music and stuff like that. Like, I mean, this is the perfect time, and I love it how everybody, as soon as Donald Trump was elected as president,
Elected.
everybody on my Facebook was like, "Well, the best punk music came out in the '80s."
Yes.
Everybody,
Yes.
they're like, I'm like, okay, so we're just gonna have like the next Dead Kennedys or the next whoever is gonna come out and blow our minds. But yeah, I always
Or
thought that.
even to that effect, like Ministry, like when they put out NWO and a lot of the stuff off of that record, even.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Time is ripe for good music, apparently. But so
Are
I
you
yeah,
writing more now, being inspired by any of this, or
absolutely, sure,
yeah?
sure, yeah. I mean, like I said, I've been away from my musical equipment. I didn't have a guitar or anything with me when I was there because it's too expensive for me to bring everything over. Um, but now I think there's no shortage of things to think about and to compose if I need to.
Because as I was listening to was it the TKS or the TSK radio
TKS,
show?
yeah.
Okay, you had talked about your writing process a little bit on that, as far as like Amphibious Assault and even the solo career stuff for it's Human Conditional, right?
Yeah, you got it. Yep.
Okay, awesome. I sometimes have a tendency to flip things around, and I was like, "Conditional Human" doesn't sound right, but it sounds like it'd be a rather cool record, maybe more for Amphibious Assault style
Indeed,
stuff. But
indeed, indeed.
with that being the case, you had talked about your writing process. The thing that kind of struck me, especially with Amphibious Assault, to me, sort of being something that would probably be deemed more as a solo project initially.
Mhm.
You had talked about how the drummer was especially the thing that helps you vibe and kind of create like a I guess a vibe. I just said it for a song or where it's going. As someone who is so into, I won't just generalize it by saying industrial, but like electronic music and things that don't necessarily require there to be other people present,
Mhm.
but having already admitted that you vibe better off of other people,
Yeah.
um, how how is it that you are drawn to something that requires you to that allows you to be so independent, but that you're also not able to find the creative spark sometimes unless there's another person there?
Yeah, it's very, very hard to reconcile. Absolutely. I find that what was great about doing like in between Amphibious Assault and Human Conditional, I did have a band that I brought all of these sort of skeleton Amphibious Assault stuff to a real drummer and to a real band, which was amazing, which is exactly what I needed. But everybody was in their own bands and doing their own thing, and unfortunately it just didn't work out. But I was like, this is exactly what I need, and then poof, it was gone. So it is very, very difficult to reconcile. I like the independence, but I also hate it at the same time. And again, that goes with the two opposing forces that I was telling you about earlier. You are a jerk. Get off of there.
Not me, people. Not me.
Yeah, sorry, not you. Not you. He's trying to get my attention. I see you. Don't worry.
Are you still a fan?
Um,
Like, have you found that like it's still hard to be a fan of music and going to
it,
live shows? Actually, no. I know
yeah,
that's wrong because you just admitted that you were a fan of Sign Writer and I already blanked on the other dude's
and
name.
LPN 667, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure they don't tour. They're from both of them. I think are from Milwaukee, which is strange. Um, it, that they're completely not related. As far as I know, there's not the same guy. But anyway, um, yeah, the last show that I went to was Digitalism, actually.
What is that?
They are like this German duo of like dance music, kind of, not dance, they're like more like house, I guess, or techno, if you want to say. Kind of big with bros and stuff like that. But I really,
Uh,
I kind of, really dig them. But before that would have been V&V Nation and Combi Christ. Um, but I think in my heart, if I'm gonna pay for a show, um, it'll be for V&V Nation, Rammstein, or Deftones,
I'm gonna
without a
go see
doubt. Like,
Deftones very soon, and I'm very excited about it.
oh!
Yeah, I don't know. That was just kind of something I was thinking of. So, with that being said, let's wrap this up. Where can people find
Sure.
you? Your socials?
My social meds. Um, so my social meds, most of them is all at Fallon Bowman. So that's Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook. Even I think it's just Fallon Bowman. There aren't many Fallon Bowmans in the world, so generally, if you type that in, that's where I am. Any There isn't really anything new coming up with me aside from I'm trying to work on my YouTube channel right now, to try and do more travel vlogs. It's something that I wanted to work on because a lot of people are like, yeah, we like your vlogs, you should do more. And I'm like, okay, wow, I don't really know what I'm doing, but this is me doing stuff, and it's crazy. People like that kind of thing. Oh,
Reading your story about the lady who didn't speak your language and just throwing up the X's with her fingers saying no, 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 no. Like I honestly
like
the
what?
honestly where I went with it, I thought it was your hair dye because you made it seem like you had your hair colored and that maybe it was running in the pool or that they were afraid it would saturate the pool. So that was my
It's
thought initially was
actually, yeah,
that you had hair dye going in the pool and they were afraid of that, not that you had a tattoo on your back. And then
yeah,
as soon as you're like, I mean, there's the Yakuza. I was like, yeah, there's the Yakuza, but like they don't have thumbs, or is it
yeah.
pinkies? Thumbs or
And the
pinkies?
other thing is that I now that when I'm thinking back on it, I think it was like a combination of things, but it was more so that my hair was actually down, which
Oh, is that a thing? Is that a
which
thing
is
in their culture?
that's also a thing in their cultures that
I didn't know that.
your hair needs to be covered so that it doesn't like it's a hygienic thing as well. So I was
Ah,
thinking, like, was it about the tattoos or was it about my hair being down? And she was gesturing, and it was so aggressive. I'm like, what is your problem, lady? Like, fuck off! Like, really? But anyway,
I will let you get back to feeding your cat.
he's
And
staring at me right now, like,
you were
all
supposed
right,
to be
well,
done like 20
enough of
minutes
that,
ago.
lady.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. And like I said, I was really apprehensive about asking you initially. You were one of the first, I'd say, like 5 or 6 guests I really wanted to reach out to and get. So I was really thankful and shocked that you were so energetic about it and wanting to do it.
Anytime, buddy. Anytime. Like I'm pretty a lot of ways kind of an open book. So people, like, if they email me, I'm never gonna be like, oh, people, I don't want to talk to them or whatever. No, I'm not like that. I never have been, and I never will be.
You made the comment that most everybody that's commenting on your thing, you recognize their usernames, you recognize them
Yep.
from other things. So I mean, like
Yep.
obviously, it seems like you have a very close relationship with your fans, or even to the point of being friends or whatever.
Sure.
Last question I have, just because I just did a podcast with Matt Nixon, who did the Misery Signals documentary that's been in the works for 3 years now.
Oh,
Uh, I know you all have posted collectively and on their socials that you all were getting together for your interviews collectively, probably for the retrospect as a whole. But is there a
yep.
tentative time frame where you maybe have a release date for this thing, or are we still looking at least another year or so?
No, it'll definitely be this year. I know that it is actually completed.
Okay.
Um, and I think that there's going to be more since Trisha's passing. I feel like there's going to
Yeah,
be more of a
sorry to hear about
push to
that.
try and. Yeah, no, I mean that was really came out of left field. That whole situation was really crazy, and I think now that there's going to be more of a push to try and get it out um, sooner rather than later, since it's, as far as I know, it is actually done. So
Have you seen a rough cut of it, like, or is it like, because like with the Misery Signals thing, like they decided to try to shop it to a couple of like film festivals and such, like,
festivals,
yeah, is
yeah.
there like a push to maybe do that with it and get a wider release, or is it just strictly going to be for the fans getting it out and it's going to live like the way it does digitally or whatever?
I think probably the latter. As far as I know, that there wasn't any bigger plans for it at the moment, anyways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know that's outside of the documentary I just mentioned. That was one of the other ones I was very interested in seeing, just due to the expansive history of the band and how many members it's included and
Yeah.
where everyone's lives have gone and all that. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something I'm looking forward to whenever it drops. So,
Certainly. Certainly.
well, again, thank you for your time, and go ahead and feed your cat because I'm sure he's very hungry.
He's still looking at me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to thank you very much for this opportunity. I think I love chatting to people about whatever. If you want to, even if it's not about the Deftones, call me. We'll talk about things.
Cool. Well, I will be definitely in touch to do a Deftones podcast because that sounds like a lot of fun to
Yeah.
me.
Nice. I'm so excited.
Well, there we go. So we can look forward to doing that down the road in the next few months of the year, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
So again, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So that was my chat with Fallon Bowman. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Lots of cool information of when Kittie was just starting off and what she's been up to. And I don't know very many archaeologists in real life, so it was really cool to kind of discuss a little bit about the process of how she came to that profession. And I'm really looking forward to the Deftones discography run through that we have planned. We have a start date of when we're going to go through Adrenaline. And then we'll kind of go from there through the rest of the album in chronological order. But really looking forward to getting into these records and talking about them at great length as a band that we both love. Speaking of love, if you want to show me some love, you can head over to Facebook at John's Untitled Podcast or Instagram at John's Untitled Podcast. That's John's Jons, no H. Twitter, John's Untitled Pod. And if for whatever reason you want to email me, you can do such at johnsuntitledpod at gmail.com. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. So if you use any of those, follow, rate, review, subscribe, whatever it is that specific medium has you do to follow me and get this podcast, please do it. I got a lot of great guests lined up, and hopefully you've enjoyed the past episodes that are already out there. If you haven't, go back and listen to those now. You can tell that I'm learning a lot from the Talk to Me podcast, with Josh being able to segue right into these things and knowing his socials off the top of his head, which will be my guest next week. Joshua Toomey and I sat down a couple of weeks ago and discussed some things, and since then, actually, there's been a little controversy that sparked from it, but we will get into that when that episode gets posted next week, so be on the lookout for that. Fallon recently just posted a video on her YouTube channel. You can find it under Fallon Bowman TV. You can find her on all of her socials at Fallon Bowman, like she said in the episode. And without further ado, we end the episode every week with a song. We actually debated for a little while about which song it would be and why, and we came to the conclusion that it would be Risk. So without further ado, here's the Deftones with Risk. Enjoy the rest of your week. See you next time.
Can't talk, I'm anxious. I'm off the wall, I'm right here. Just come outside and see it. But back your heart, you might need it. I'll find a way. I'm confused, but I think I can try. I will say you're right. I will say you're right. I try. but I think I can try. I will save your life. I will save your life. I'll try for you. I know what to say to take you higher, higher. No one else can take you higher, but I will try. I'll find a way. I'll confuse you, but I think I can try. I will save your life. I will save your life. I'll try. I'll find a way. I'll confuse you, but I think I can try. I will save your life. I will save your life. I'll try for you. For you.